So on this last page, it starts off and it says, some IQ tests are standardized to a normal model with a mean of 110 and a standard deviation of 14. Draw the model for these IQ scores, clearly label it, showing what the 68, 95, 99.7 rule predicts about the scores. So it tells us that we want to label it, we want to draw it, and we want to use the 68, 95, 99.7. So I've given you those percentages like I said I would of what should go in the curve. We can see question number 5 and question number 6 are asking us to do the same thing. They've just given us a different mean and a different standard deviation. Okay. So we're going to start drawing our normal distribution curve. And you want to draw it so that you have some room at the top and the bottom because we're going to have to label this. Our mean goes right into the middle here. Our mean is 110. So now we're going to apply our standard deviation. 3 lines to the left, 3 lines to the right. Remember, we subtract the value to get the numbers on the left, and we add the value to get the numbers on the right. So 110 minus 14 gives us 96. 96 minus 14 gives us 82. 82 minus 14 gives us 68. Now we add it on the right side. 110 plus 114 is 124. 124 plus 14 is 138. 138 plus 14 is 152. Now that we have our numbers at the bottom, we want to label it. Okay, here's our labels. We want to place the 68, 95, 99.7 rule into it. So 1 standard deviation to the left and to the right, 2 standard deviations to the left and the right, 3 standard deviations to the left and the right. So in between our first 2 lines is 68%. So put the 68%. You need to have that listed. Our next one is 95%. And then we have our 99.7%. You need to make sure that you have all 3 of these labeled here. I also suggest you put the labels around the normal distribution curve because you will need them to help you answer some questions. So remember how we did that? 68%. There's 2 boxes. We divide it by 2. That gives us 34 and 34. To find our next 2 boxes, which is 95%, we're going to have to subtract that 68% and then divide it by 2, and we get 13.5. We're going to do the same thing, 99.7 minus the 95, and then divide it by 2. We get 2.35. And then our last one is 100 minus the 99.7 and then divide by 2, and we get 0.15. Now that we have our normal distribution curve drawn, labeled with all the rules, all the percentages, now we can go ahead and answer our questions. In what interval would you expect the central 95% of the IQ scores to be found? Well, 95% is right here. It is between 82 and 138. So what interval? Between 82 and 138. About what percent of people should have IQ scores above 124? If it says above 124, we are going to take 124 and we want to add all the percentages above 124. So we'll take our calculators and we will add 13.5 plus 2.35 plus 0.15, and that gives us 16. So that means that there are 16% above 124. About what percent of people should have IQ scores between 68 and 152? 68 and 152 are right here. So this percentage is 99.7, so 99.7%. And then part E says about what percent of people should have IQ scores below 96. So we're going to do the same thing that we did with the above, only this time we're going to go below. So here's 96. We're going to add all these numbers together, which are below. And it turns out that they're the same numbers over here, so it's going to come out to be the same amount. 13.5 plus 2.35 plus 0.15 is 16%. You're going to do the same thing that you did in question number 5 for question number 6. So I want you to pause the video now and try to do question number 6 on your own. Remember, you want to try to pause the videos and work on these questions on your own. Otherwise, you're not going to know how to do them when you have to do the quiz. So pause the video and then come back. Okay, so hopefully you did pause it. You are listening to my directions. So we're going to place our mean, 3 standard deviations to the left, 3 standard deviations to the right. Okay, I'm going to turn my paper because I'm not going to have enough room to fill in all my numbers here. Your numbers should have been from the farthest left to the farthest right, 78, 108, 138, 168, 198, 228, and 258. So now we're going to label our 68%. Yes, you do need to label this for each graph that you make. Just because you had it correct up in part 5 does not mean you get credit for it in question number 6. You need to make sure that you have these 3 percentages written inside your curve to get credit in questions 5 and 6. The numbers that are on the outside of the curve are going to be the same for every single normal distribution. So once we have found them up here, we can just copy them down in our next normal distribution curve. So I'm just going to sit here and copy down those values because, again, we will need to use them to answer some of the questions below. Question B says, what percent of adult women do you expect to have cholesterol levels over 198 milligrams? So 198 is right here. So we're going to add up these 3 numbers together. So in our calculator, 13.5 plus 2.35 plus 0.15, and I get 16, so 16%. Question C says, what percent of adult women do you expect to have cholesterol levels between 78 and 258? So here's 78 and here's 258. Well, that is 99.7%, so we have 99.7%. In between what values does 95% of the data lie? 95% is between this number and this number, which is 108 and 228, so 108 to 228. And then it says, above what value are the highest 16%? Well, so that means highest 16%, so we're going to start here. And starting with this 0.15, we're going to keep adding these numbers until we get to 16. Okay, and so we'll add 13.5. And we get to 16. We get to 16 right here at this value, that value of 198. So our answer here would be 198.